there's a version of your life that lives entirely inside your head. And it is spectacular. In that version, you've written the book, built the business, moved to the city, made the call, started the thing. In that version, you wake up with purpose and go to bed with satisfaction. You've done the hard thing and it worked, and people who doubted you are somewhere in the background of a life that finally looks the way you always knew it could. You've visited that version of your life so many times you almost know it by heart. The details are vivid. The feeling is real. And yet, here you are, same place you were 6 months ago. Same idea, still unstarted. Same dream, still unlived. And the gap between what you imagine and what you're actually doing has quietly become one of the most uncomfortable spaces you inhabit. Sound familiar? If it does, I want you to know something right away. You are not lazy. You are not talentless. You are not someone who simply doesn't want it badly enough. What's happening inside you is far more psychologically layered than any of those easy explanations, and today, we're going to pull it apart honestly, carefully, and with the kind of empathy the topic actually deserves. Let's start with the dream itself, because the dream is not the problem. In fact, the capacity to imagine a different and better future is one of the most distinctly human cognitive abilities we possess. Psychologists call it prospective memory, the ability to mentally project yourself into future scenarios, and research consistently shows that this ability is linked to creativity, intelligence, and motivation. The people who dream vividly are often the people with the most genuine potential to build something real. The dream is not a distraction from the life. The dream is a blueprint. So why doesn't the blueprint become a building? Here's where it gets interesting. And a little uncomfortable. But stay with me. There is a psychological phenomenon called self-handicapping, first described by researchers Stephen Bergloss and Edward Jones in the late 1970s, and it is one of the most quietly destructive patterns a human mind can run. Self-handicapping is what happens when your brain, terrified of failure, arranges conditions that make failure explainable. You don't start the business because you don't have the time, and if you never start, you never have to find out whether you actually could have done it. You don't submit the work because it's not quite ready, and as long as it's not ready, it can never be rejected. Do you see what's happening there? The dream stays perfect because it's never tested. The talent stays theoretical because it's never proven. And the mind, your mind, gets to live in a state where the best possible version of yourself remains permanently, safely possible. Unlaunched potential is the only potential that never fails. This is not laziness. This is self-preservation. This is your brain protecting your identity from the one thing it fears more than anything else, the discovery that maybe you aren't as capable as you hoped. And then there's the role that dopamine plays in all of this, because your brain chemistry is working against you in ways that are almost unfair. When you imagine achieving your dream, when you picture the finished book, the successful launch, the standing ovation, your brain releases dopamine. The same chemical it releases when you actually achieve things. Your brain, at a neurochemical level, does not always distinguish sharply between imagining success and experiencing it. Which means that the act of dreaming, vivid, detailed, emotionally rich dreaming, is already rewarding you before you've done a single thing. You've already gotten some of the feeling. And once you've gotten some of the feeling, the urgent drive to go earn it for real becomes just slightly less sharp. This is why vision boards and daydreaming without action can sometimes work against people rather than for them. The research of psychologist Gabrielle Edingen found that people who engaged in pure positive fantasy about their goals, imagining success without also mentally contrasting it with current reality, actually showed lower energy and less follow-through than those who engaged with both the dream and the obstacles simultaneously. Your brain needs the friction. It needs the gap between now and then to feel real enough to motivate movement. But there's something even deeper here, something that doesn't get said enough. For many people who dream big and do little, the real issue isn't motivation. It isn't dopamine. It isn't even fear of failure in the ordinary sense. The real issue is fear of becoming someone different. Think about that for a second. Every big dream, if pursued seriously, eventually requires you to change, to grow, to make decisions that the person you are right now doesn't yet know how to make, to become someone your current social circle might not recognize, to step into a version of yourself that feels exciting from a distance but genuinely terrifying up close. And your identity, the deep psychological story you carry about who you are, is remarkably resistant to change. Even positive change. Even wanted change. Psychologists call this phenomenon identity protection, and it operates almost entirely below conscious awareness. You don't think, "I'm afraid of becoming successful." You think, "I'll start next Monday." You don't think, "I don't know how to be the person who does this." You think, "I just need to find the right system, the right tool, the right moment." There's a word that sometimes gets attached to people in this pattern. Procrastinator. And it's the wrong word, or at least an incomplete one. Because procrastination implies you'll get to it eventually, just later. What many big dreamers experience is something closer to what psychologist Neil Fiore described as the psychology of the overwhelmed, the state where a goal feels so large, so significant, so tied to your entire sense of self-worth, that any single action toward it feels simultaneously too small to matter and too high stakes to risk. When the dream is big enough, every step toward it carries the weight of the whole thing. Writing one page of the book isn't writing one page. It's the first moment of finding out if you actually have a book in you. Sending one email isn't sending one email. It's the beginning of discovering whether anyone cares about what you have to offer. The stakes attached to small actions become enormous. And enormous stakes create enormous paralysis. This is also, by the way, why people who dream big often stay incredibly busy with everything except the thing. Because busyness is the perfect cover. If you're always occupied, always handling something urgent, always one crisis away from having, there's a word that sometimes gets attached to people in this pattern. Procrastinator. And it's the wrong word, or at least an incomplete one. Because procrastination implies you'll get to it eventually, just later. The space you need, then the gap between your dream and your reality has an explanation that isn't failure. It's circumstance. And circumstance is so much easier to live with than inadequacy. So what actually changes this? What shifts the pattern? The honest answer is that it begins with a single act of cognitive courage, the willingness to separate the dream from your identity just enough to take an imperfect step toward it. Not the perfect step, not the step that proves everything. Just the step that proves motion is possible. Psychologist B.J. Fogg spent years researching behavior change at Stanford and found that the single most effective predictor of lasting behavioral change wasn't motivation, wasn't willpower, wasn't even habit. It was starting smaller than you think you need to. So small it feels almost embarrassing. Because a small action done is infinitely more powerful than a large action imagined. The person who writes one terrible paragraph today is already living closer to their dream than the person who is planning to write the perfect chapter next month. And here's the reframe that I want to leave you with. The fact that you dream at all, the fact that something inside you keeps returning to that vision no matter how many times reality interrupts it, is not a sign that you are delusional or self-deceiving. It's a sign that something genuine is trying to surface. Dreams that persist are not accidents. They are signals. They are your deeper self pointing, again and again, at something real. The question isn't whether the dream is worth pursuing. You already know it is. The question is whether you're willing to let the imperfect, uncomfortable, slightly humbling process of actually doing the thing be part of your story. Whether you can give yourself permission to be a beginner at something you care about deeply. Whether the person you're afraid of becoming might actually be the person you've been waiting to meet. You don't need a perfect plan. You need one honest move. And then another. And then another. That's how the life inside your head starts leaking into the life you're actually living. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's the one dream that keeps coming back no matter how many times you push it away? I read every single one. And if this video felt like something you needed to hear, there is so much more waiting for you here. The understanding of yourself is never wasted. Keep going.